Hi everyone, I hope that you are well. Welcome to our Tuesday of our final week. And this is our last Tuesday of our reading assembly because everyone is coming back to school, which is great next week. Yesterday we we started off our chapter, didn't we, all about wildlife, and we looked at how many of the different wildlife are endangered. We then looked at reasons why, and unfortunately the majority of that was because of humans. There are a lot of humans out there that do protect animals, but there are equally a lot of humans before our time and during our time now that are harming animals because of different things that they are doing on the planet. So it's up for us to be aware of what's happening and then try and change it. So we're going to look again at losing their homes. This is more information about the habitats, the places that animals live and why they might become extinct because of the places that they live are being destroyed. And then we're going to have to look at wild crimes, so different things that are happening in the wildlife that also affect animals, things to do with like stealing animals or poaching them, so killing them. Like we said, for when we looked at the white rhino, they were just killing them purely for the horns and their snout, and the rest of the animal they didn't want, but because of obviously they killed the animals to get them, then they eventually became extinct. So losing their homes, and again, I know that I asked everyone, didn't I, to have a look and see if they could research about any animals that are extinct other than the ones that I've spoken about. So hopefully you'll be able to tell your friends about that during this session. So losing their homes. Habitat loss is the #1 threat to wildlife. From rainforests to wetlands, natural habitats are destroyed every day in people's quest for land, food, and other resources. Urban sprawl. According to the United Nations, around 4.2 billion people now live in towns and cities, over 5 times more than in 1950. As new towns are built and existing ones get bigger, they take over land and resources that were once used by other living things. Wetland woes. Wetlands are regions where water meets land, such as marshes and rivers. They support lots of plants and creatures. Many wetlands have been destroyed to create land for homes, factories, or farms. In the past 120 years, 2/3 of the world's wetlands have disappeared. Again, all of this to do with human activity. Splitting up. The demand for food means that ranches get bigger and break up wild regions. This creates problems for creatures like big cats and grazing animals, which require huge territories, so huge areas of land. Many can't find enough food as a result and are killed when they stray into areas where people live. So they might die from isolation, but they also might be shot down and killed because they are dangerous animals. But when they have no food, they'll then go looking elsewhere for food. And a lot of the time that will be in towns and cities and people are scared of them, don't really realise why. They think, oh, they're coming here to eat all of us. Whereas actually they're quite desperate because we've ruined the amount of normal food that they'd have. They come looking for food in the cities and then they're shot because they are dangerous creatures. Damnation. Dams often flood an area of land to form a reservoir. Apart from this direct loss of habitat, dams can also stop fish migrating along rivers, that means moving along rivers, like we saw in our little fish book. Dead plants, which would normally be washed downstream, can build up behind a dam. 2, as the plants rot, they use up the water's oxygen, meaning the reservoir is unable to support life, so it's unable there to have living things in it. Tree houses. According to the World Wildlife Fund, 75,600 square kilometres of forests are cut down each year. And we learned that, didn't we, from last week, causing the creatures who live in them to lose their homes. In Brazil, deforestation has resulted in the number of species threatened with extinction tripling in 15 years. That means getting 3 times bigger. More than 600 species are now at serious risk of dying out. Habitat degradation. Some habitats are not completely taken over by people, but are still damaged by their activities. Dredging a harbour to make it deeper, for example, can cause great harm. Dredgers scour the seabed, killing plants and creatures and smothering plenty more with the silt and mud that comes from the digging. Wow. My gosh, doesn't look like a good picture, does it here? Okay, let's have a look at our wild crime. Okay, the illegal trade in exotic pets and animal parts is a major threat to some of the world's most endangered species. That means selling different parts of animals. It can also lead to the introduction of invasive species and diseases, which really could link quite closely in with coronavirus. Pet and poaching. Many creatures are protected by law, yet sadly, that does not stop criminals from hunting or capturing them. The illegal wildlife trade is big business. The UN Environment Programme estimates it's worth around $23 billion a year. But what does it actually involve, right? Some wild creatures are captured to sell as exotic pets. Often poorly cared for, these animals tend to live miserable, very short lives. Ivory forms the teeth or tusks of walruses, whales, and elephants. Okay, so tusks come up here in some of the animals. The tragic trade in elephant ivory saw African elephant numbers drop by 100,000 between 2010 and 2012. So in 2 years, 100,000 were killed. It is estimated that 55 African elephants are still killed every day for their ivory tusks. And that's why they say when you go abroad to these countries, do not buy ivory because it's not very eco-friendly. It's very damaging and it kills the animal. Other creatures are killed for their fur, feathers, or skin. Chinchillas were almost hunted to extinction for their soft fur because it took around 150 to make one coat. Wow. Traditional medicines in some regions of the world call for ingredients made from the body parts of endangered wild creatures such as tigers, jaguars, and animals. And even though that's not one of the biggest killers of them, it still helps to get those numbers up there, which is just really sad. And all of this is not only harmful to the population of the creatures, but it is not a nice way for them to die. Invaders. The introduction of invasive species, plants and creatures brought into habitats where they don't belong, can also unbalance ecosystems, especially when the invader starts to breed rapidly. In the past, rats in ships sailed by explorers destroyed entire island populations of seabirds, eating them and their eggs. So when the rats were on the boat, when the boats got to the new islands, the rats got off the boats and they ended up hunting for food, ended up killing a lot of the species that only survived on the island. Invasive plants can also be destructive. Kudzu is a vine from Asia, which now covers more than 890 square kilometers in the United States. The vine grows 30 centimeters a day, smothering and killing other plants in its path. In the 1930s, 2,400 South American cane toads were released in Australia to control crop-eating beetles. There are now over 200 million, all covered with a toxic slime that kills many Australian animals. Wow, so we have to be very careful, even though maybe the intentions are right, that they want them to kill another pest, you have to be very careful that that doesn't get out of control either, which it arguably has done in Australia. What can you do? Now, this is the bit that we want to know, don't we? The illegal trade in wildlife and the impact on invasive species is shocking, but there are things that you can do to help. Number one, stop family and friends from buying exotic animals. Choose pets native to your region or adopt from a rescue centre. 2, never release aquarium fish or exotic pets into the wild. Okay, so those animals that have been used to being in captivity, that means they're used to surviving on humans. If you release them in the wild, they won't survive long because they're not used to it. And as well, they might get diseases that they're not immune to, so they can't fight off. 3, never buy items made from ivory, fur, teeth from protected species, or sea turtle shells, because all of those kill the animal to get them. 4, if you suspect someone or a shop is selling illegal creatures, ask an adult to investigate. 5, sign petitions to support campaigns against wildlife crimes. My gosh, it was a bit doom and gloom as well, those 2 pages, wasn't it? So we've looked today at losing their homes and what's the cause of these animals losing their homes. And then we've looked at the crimes that involve various animals and the hunting and killing of those animals, which is just terrible. What I'd like you to do just to finish this session is talk to the person next to you about 3 key things that you've learned about the preservation and the protection of animals. And then just before I go, what I will say is tomorrow we're going to look at campaigns for conservation. So that means what people are doing now to protect birds and other animals. And then also, very importantly, our bees. What are people doing and what can we do to protect our bees? Because they were also in a lot of danger a couple of years ago before we started really making efforts to protect them. Okay, so again, like I said, at the end of this session, have a discussion about 3 things that you have learned about animal protection and preservation. Okay, and I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday. Bye, everyone.